Okay. First up on the agenda is the Safe Return to School and Community of Service Plan. This is an information item to start with and 2 action items on this. I want to remind the public that we take comment on action items only. So Micah, are you ready?
I am. All right. I'm going to start by just reading a statement to the board and to our community. First, I want to thank you in advance for understanding that this is a fluid situation that requires flexibility. I know we all agree that keeping kids safe and in school is the priority for their social, emotional, physical, and educational well-being. As school leaders and board members, we find ourselves in a very difficult, even agonizing position as we recognize that there is no decision without risk and no decision that will please everyone. As we have navigated the last 18 months, issues surrounding COVID-19 are sensitive and have created conflict and division. The debate over public health and the good of all versus personal responsibility and choice has never been more evident. We've seen state legislation and communication from our governor and state superintendent that are counter to the recommendations and guidance given by our healthcare system and public health leadership. And somehow our schools have become a flashpoint in this conversation, where we're charged not only with educating our community's children, but are asked to do so in a safe environment. While I do believe that masking is one of our best mitigation tools in limiting spread and keeping our schools open, it is very difficult for our schools to implement such a policy successfully without the support of our broader community. From my perspective, the polarization within our community has been wearisome for everyone. The constant conflict that comes with enforcing a mask mandate significantly diminishes our ability to focus on what we do best. This is not something that we take lightly. We strongly believe that our students deserve more than ongoing conflict and tension. As our district works through the many difficult decisions in response to COVID-19, a strong sentiment has begun to emerge. KPF would like to do whatever we can to bring our community together through building relationships, respect, and common ground. We hope to avoid the need to make decisions that cause division, contribute to hostility, and require enforcement within our school community. We would prefer to invest our efforts in fostering an atmosphere of care and respect for one another, not because we must, because it's the right thing to do. Tonight, I'm going to update the board with a renewed look at our Safe Return to Schools plan, giving the board a chance to ask administration questions. I am in no way saying that I am correct, and I am aware of my own bias. I will also state that I'm not a statistician, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an epidemiologist, although sometimes I play one on TV. Most of the data I'm sharing with you comes directly from our county health department, Logan Health, and other respected sources. And I'm going to be moving from my computer to Callie's computer to standing in front of the board as we go through some of these slides in the data presentation tonight. So with that, I'm going to get started. And I may need to have Callie help me a little bit. So I'm going to need to get to the website. There we go. You'll have me. All right. Trust me, this is going to be good. Okay. So first, we're going to review our priorities. Yep, I was working. So presentation objectives tonight: review our priorities, provide some relevant data, share our contingency plans, discuss operational options, and present some recommendations to the board for consideration tonight. And part of this is, if you want to look back to June, things seemed really good. And then July came around, and then we saw our first Delta variant start to show up in our community, And if we watch the news and read the paper, we see that there's an escalation in cases, and some real concern. At our last board meeting, we decided that we were going to keep masks optional, and have certainly received some feedback. I know our board members have received some feedback on that. I have received feedback on that, but it's the place that we're in, nonetheless. So our priorities during the pandemic. Last year we said right away we want to keep our schools open. We want to provide in-person instruction. We provide remote instruction options to our vulnerable population, and then we have a continued focus on our mitigation efforts. Masking isn't the only effort. And from our perspective right now, we're going to have to be even more diligent in what we do and what we communicate to our students, our families, when it comes to these things. I'm going to start by taking you to a website that's called COVID-Estin, and this is a partnership of Yale School of Public Health, Harvard School of Public Health, and Stanford Medicine. And what this website shows is projections based on actual data and what they believe is really occurring in our community. So on this website, and anybody can go to it, I'm going to start at home. And what this does is it gives you a look at the United States, but then it also breaks out each state individually. And so what you're looking at are the infections per 100,000. And you can see a lot of different things happening in these graphs, depending on what state it is. So Alabama looks like it's coming down currently. Alaska is on its way up. There are 338 infections per 100,000 currently. And this thing updates all the time. It changed from this morning when I looked at it, it changed from a couple hours ago when I looked at it. So you can see that all these states are doing various things. And when you get to the state of Montana, right now we're on a little bit of an upswing. We're looking at about 152 infections per 100,000 as of August 20th. And if you click on the details of this, it shows the rate of transmission. RT is the rate of infection. So anything above 1 is bad. Anything below 1 is better. Doesn't mean it's great. But what it's really referring to is for every one person that gets infected, another 0.97 in the state of Montana are going to become infected. And so what it says in here is that if it's above 1, cases will increase in the near future. If it's below, cases will decrease in the near future. And this is looking at what Montana looked like in terms of that effective reproduction number. The other thing you can do is you can go specifically to a county. Now I'm going to go to our lovely Flathead County, and it shows that we have a rate of infection at 0.91 presently. What this is also doing is it's estimating, based on actual case data, what the county infection rate is, and they have it right now at 157.9 infections per 100,000. The county cases are just a little over 14,000. Those are confirmed, lab confirmed positive cases. But they actually think the county infection rate is at 41,000. We have people who have been asymptomatic, who never knew they had it. We have people who say they had it, they never got tested, they just knew. And so this is really looking at what their infection rates are. And so you see where the infection number is, and you can see for a while we were creeping up. We were up at 1.25, 1.26 on July 5th. And even though case counts are going up, the rate of infection is actually going down. And then this is done infections per capita. So back at the end of June, when school got out, they were looking at about 30, 35 infections. And right now, we peaked out at about 170, even though maybe the case count only said 50, right? So the average case count in Flathead County might be 50 right now per day, but this is what they're actually estimating it really was. So for the county, they actually estimate that 40% of the county has been infected at this point with COVID. And then these are the actual cases, these gray bars that you see up here. Those are the actual cases. This Orange brown line is the moving average. So what it's really trying to do is smooth out where you have really low dips. So one day it might only be 4 cases, and the next day it might be 124. The data is only as good as the input. So if people aren't testing, or if the testing centers are closed down, or it's a holiday, or different things like that happen, it skews it. The other thing that skews it when you look at the county data on the county website is they don't update over the weekend. So they might have all the cases from Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and then they roll those all into Monday's cases. So I wanted to give that look at what is being inferred based on case data for Flathead County. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. So I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint. So this is health department data. This is the new cases over time, and the blue line represents actual cases, and the yellow line is the 14-day moving average being applied to that. So you can kind of see what the valley looks like in terms of total cases right now. And again, there's 14,000 cases.
Mike, I need to share for our guests that are online.
Sure.
If you would give me just a second. Can you see it? Okay. So Mike,
It's slide 5.
okay.
Yeah, see that online? All right. So that's the big picture. And that is from November 1st of 2020 to August 16th of 2021. So then what I did is I took the end of that graph, the right end of that graph, and kind of blew it up and made it a little more granular. So you can see what's happening in our county right now. There are dates in here from the county data that did not have any cases reported. And I don't know if that was around a holiday or what it was, but this was the information that I got from Joe Russell, County Health Department. And again, that 14-day moving average is being applied. So you can kind of see we're definitely spiking up here with new cases. So now I'm going to break it back down even more granular to what was going on in May. The red line is the trend line. So the average was 14.3 cases per day in May. And you could do that days where we had 33, and there were other days when we were as low as 7. So that's what we want to see. June dropped down to 9 cases per day, even better. Days where we only had 1 or 2, and then July. And just for clarification, the first Delta variant in Kalispell was noticed in the surveillance testing done by the CDC. They send in the samples and they test for these variants, was first noticed in July, but the specimen actually came from someone who got sick in early June. So even though we didn't know about it until July, the Delta variant had actually been in the county for some time before they noticed that. But then we start seeing this trend upward in July. So now we're back up to 20 cases per day. And here's August. This is through August 16th. We're averaging almost 52 cases per day. The trend line isn't steep, but it's still trending upward. And we're still continuing to see that based on the new data that's coming in. So any questions about that information at this point? Make sense? So this next slide is the positivity rate versus the total test. Over here on the left is the percent positive rate. So for every person that goes in and gets tested, divided by the number of people who tested positive gives you your percent positive rate. And so you see the orange line is the test being administered. So, so the orange line is test administered. So at this point, we were up over 5,000 tests being administered. And then we saw a really sharp decrease. So you can see there were some spikes in that data in May. And then we really dipped off in the middle of June, and then you can see where we started to spike back up again. But what we're seeing is this trend of more testing. And what typically the the county health officer would tell us is that more people that are symptomatic are getting tested. People who are asymptomatic are not getting tested. So when you see a spike in tests, you're seeing more people. Some of this testing data includes people that are required to test as a condition of their work. So in long-term care facilities, healthcare facilities, they are surveillance testing their staff just as a precaution. But we're starting to see more and more of our community being tested. And I kind of referred to my notes. As of August 21st, there were 3,145 tests administered, and there were 467 positives for a positivity rate of 14.8%. So we're just under that 15% positive right now.
Micah,
Yeah,
does that include like university testing for athletes? Do you know?
this is just for Flathead County.
Oh, that's just Flathead
Just
County?
Flathead County.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we have the weekly vaccination administration, right? So again, our health officials, our county health officer, our governor, our president, our former president, everybody's saying get vaccinated. There is no hesitancy in Flathead County for vaccination. But what we're seeing, these blue numbers, is an uptick in people getting their first dose. So in that first week of August, we jumped up to 655 people who got their first dose. That's positive for our community. That's positive for what our goals and incentives are. So we want to see that upward trend of people getting vaccinated. So according to the county data, this was as of August 20th. When I first got this slide, it was August 15th. I got new data yesterday. We hit 47% vaccination in Flathead County as a total. But the next slide will be really telling too, because what we see is our overpopulation, pretty good vaccination rate, and then it decreases. And we have this group of 0 to 11-year-olds who are not eligible to be vaccinated yet. But they make up, that's 14,819 students according to the county data.
So if you go back to that slide, and most parents that have kids in school are in what age groups? The 25 to 50?
You're gonna be somewhere in here, in the 18 to 49.
And so it's almost like their age corresponds to their vaccination desire.
There is a little bit of that, yeah, I mean, you can draw some conclusions like that. So this next chart, what this is showing is the number of people who are vaccinated versus the number of people in that age group. So here is your 0 to 11, and you see that it's colored in orange there. I'm not a statistician, but I kind of ran my own analysis on it, and I guessed that we would be at about 18% vaccination rate with that 0 to 11-year-olds based off of what was happening with these other groups and their vaccination rate. And then I had Brad Holloway, who actually teaches statistics, run a couple of different analyses, and he came up with 19%. So I felt like I was pretty close. But as the county rate goes up, we would hope to see that other rate go up as well. And so what you're going to hear from me is, a continued voice saying, get vaccinated. It's not political, it's not anything else. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm just saying that after 3 billion doses of the COVID vaccine worldwide, I think we could get with it. But that's just me editorializing on that.
I'm sorry, Micah, the orange on the 0 to 11 is predicted?
That's predicted.
Okay.
Yep, so this orange line right here is actually a logarithmic prediction based on but there's some other factors that come into that, right? So when you look at, parents would predominantly be between the, say 25 to 50-year range of school-age children. That's where I had Brad do whatever he said. I don't know, I'm not smart enough. But. So then this next slide is the case count by age group versus the percentage of age group vaccinated with at least one dose. So over here, you have your 80-plus-year-old people, 73% vaccination rate, and this is their case count, 94. So the lowest vaccinated group, highest case count. The highest vaccinated group, the lowest case count.
Does that, it's 94 is like the number, so is the,
Yep, that's the number of cases at that point in time. So
Mm.
August 15th, there were 94 cases.
right, in the, because on the other one, like, there's there's also the smallest amount of people in that group, does that like line account, that does, oh, percentage-wise, so the percentage-wise does account for it, okay.
It's the percent vaccinated and number of cases is over here.
Percent vaccinated, but not percent per, like, age group.
I know, look at that
No, it
percent
is.
for age group.
So 73% of the 80-year-olds, 80 plus.
But
Or
90 is a number, 94 is not a percent.
Yeah,
Correct,
94.
no, 94 is the actual number of cases.
Okay. We don't know.
From March 1st, 2021 through August 15th, 2021. So that's a total number of people that got COVID. And I will say that there are breakthrough cases on vaccinated people, right? We know it, no vaccine is 100%. And when you look at the CDC's data on it, they're depending on your age and the, some other, physiological demographics that they would look at, they're still putting it at about 95% effective. So then I want to get into pediatric case counts by age group in Flathead County, and I got this information yesterday. So blue represents age 4 to 11. We do have some 4-year-olds in our schools. We have early kindergarten. So I wanted to include those students in there, even though we only have 23 of them. But, so from March of 2020 to June of 2021, 467 days, this is how many cases in Flathead County. So 636 between the ages of 4 and 11, 814 between the ages of 12 and 17. This is since July 1st. We've had 96 4 to 11-year-old cases and 72 12 to 17-year-olds. And so over here, for all 521 days that they've been keeping track of this data, there's our case count. So we're sitting right around 1,600 for the county. So what I don't know is how many of those kids are in private school, homeschool, Sunday Falls, Whitefish, Big Ford, Evergreen, West Valley, kind of, you get where I'm going with this. We don't know what that breakout is. But one of the things that you'll see in this next slide, so these are our 4 to 11-year-olds, and I couldn't figure out how to get something on here. I'll just explain it. So this was the average number of cases per day in those first 16 months. This is the average number of cases for that age group in July and August. This is the average number of cases per day in the first 16 months, and this is July and August.
Wow.
One thing that's changed. Vaccine. This group can get vaccinated, this group can't. But this is combined for each group. This is the average number of cases per day for the first 16 months, and we've gone up a 0.01 for the total for the last two. So there is an uptick in cases, but the question I have is it really dramatic? Are we seeing something, if I go back to this slide, is that 96 and 54 days a whole lot different than the 636 and the 467? And it's not. There is an uptick, but not much. So then, as we talk about Kalispell Public Schools and what we're going to do, 2% of our students are between the ages of 4 and 11 for the entire county population. Our pre-K through 6th grade makes up 2% of the entire county population. 4% of our county population is that 12 to 18-year-old. I did go into Power School and pulled out, we have 107 18-year-olds as of September 1st. We know we're going to have a bunch of 17-year-olds turn 18, but I wanted to make sure that that data was as accurate as I could get. So, I got this information from the hospital. Right now, total cases for Flathead County, and I think it went up 101 today, but 14,063 when I originally got this data. That's 14% of the population has tested positive for COVID. That COVID, estimator site would actually say it's probably 40% of the county, it's more like 40,000 people. But the pediatric case data, we had 1,739, pediatric cases in Flathead County, and I'm known if they are Flathead County residents. So we have had people come over from Browning, from Polson, from Libby, from Troy. We've had other people who are a regional healthcare center. So they represent 12% of the 14,000 cases so far. They represent 2% of the population. There have been 23 pediatric hospitalizations. And I heard today that there was one more pediatric hospitalization. 4 of those, so that's 1.3% of all the pediatric cases have resulted in a hospitalization, and 4 have required pediatric ICU. So, and again, when we start parsing out data and we try to get granular, what is a hospitalization? Does the hospital consider a 4-hour visit in the emergency room a hospitalization? Is it overnight? Is it 2 weeks? What are we talking about when it comes to those treatments? And then if we look at the death data, there have been 116 confirmed deaths related to COVID-19, which represents 0.1% of our population. It's 0.8% of all COVID cases in Flathead County, and there have been 0 pediatric deaths in Flathead County or the state. So, are kids getting sick? Yes. Are kids getting hospitalized? Yes. But are we going to make all of the decisions based off of that small piece? And it gets back a little bit to how I opened up tonight, because this is a really divisive issue. But I have concerns, and I have for about the past 3 weeks, where I haven't been sleeping really well. We have some barriers to our priorities as a district, and the first one is House Bill 702. You can't treat someone who's been vaccinated differently than you can treat someone who's been unvaccinated. It's put our county health departments in a really tough spot. I know I saw an article just moments before the board meeting started that Missoula County is going to follow the CDC guidelines for quarantine.
So not quarantine vaccinated people?
Correct. Okay. But House Bill 702 is definitely a barrier. High transmission rate of the COVID-19 Delta variant, we know that. What we don't know is what's the next variant. Is it the Omega variant, the Lambda variant? I have no idea. There's so much that's unknown about this. We have no vaccination option for kids aged 5 to 11 years old. We have a low vaccination rate in our current students that are eligible to be vaccinated. We're at 27%. We have a low vaccination rate for parents of school-age children. They're in that 30 to 35% range. And a low vaccination rate in Flathead County. Limited support with contact tracing and optional quarantine protocols. We've been advised school districts do not enter into an MOA with the county health departments to help them contact trace. So we're not doing that. We did that last year. We made a lot of phone calls to let people know, and so now we've shifted that burden back to the county health department. We will still give them seating charts and all that information, but ultimately it's going to be up to the county health department to do that. They have a labor shortage. We have a labor shortage. When we talked last year about how are we going to keep our schools open and what was our big concern, our staff can be able to be replaced with substitutes.
I'm sorry, because I did come in late. Is Bill for sure going back to his principal place? Like, we are not going to have him as our COVID coordinator?
Correct. I'm the new COVID.
Congratulations.
Another piece of this is changing CDC guidelines, right? So today it's this, tomorrow it's that, the next day it's back to this. Who knows? They may come out and mandate that everybody's going to be required to wear masks in K-12 public schools, and it won't even be an option for us. And then the last one is just that community divide on public health and personal responsibility. That seems to be the sticking point. So I want to talk a little bit, sir, you don't get to comment.
Just clarification, I just want to understand something better.
It's okay. The board can ask me questions. You can ask me after.
Okay, I'll ask you.
Okay. So supports to our priorities. We have high vaccination rates for vulnerable people. That's a good thing. And for our overpopulation, people with underlying health conditions, our district staff vaccination rate's around 70%, and that's everybody. So that's a pretty good positive for us in terms of being able to stay open. We have some flexibility with our staffing, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit here in a minute. We have community support. We really do. I mean, I know that there are people who are not happy that we're not, currently in a position where we're requiring masks, but, they've also been very gracious. And then the federal funding, you know, that has provided some relief for us. We've been able to do some things that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. And we've been able to continue to support students in school and out of school. So those are really good things. But I get to our worst case scenario. Right, and I think that's the question that at least is on my mind. I don't know about you guys. Because I just punched it to Callie and Matt and like, hey, figure it out. Worst case scenario is we're forced to close, right? So if you think that the Delta variant, well, I'll start with the wild variant. That's what it was originally called, was the wild variant. It was a 1-to-1 transmission. They're saying with the Delta variant, it's 1-to-3. So imagine a third grade classroom with 28 kids in it. One kid gets sick, 3 kids get sick, 27 kids get sick. It's not gonna take long for it to go through a classroom if someone comes to school infected. It's not. And so we have to be prepared for how are we gonna respond to that. It's most likely gonna be in a temporary closure. You know, our goal last year was to stay open, and we did it by all means necessary. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't always the best, but we did that. But it will have a negative impact on our staff, on our families, our businesses, our community. If we have to close down even a classroom or an entire school, that's gonna have a negative impact. So what would it look like if the school closed? Well, it'd be empty desks. But, you know, really what we're talking about is 100% online instruction for that, whatever that time period is. There won't be any activities. It's gonna be really hard to argue why we would have, you know, a football game when we're not in school. If the risk is that great, if it's running that rampantly, to me, that's a,
Last year, we made some special, opportunities for, the ag station, like if there's animals there that need to be fed, so that would still be in there, I assume. I mean, just,
I'll get there.
okay, sorry.
No field trips, lunches, you know, last year we were able to, you know, provide lunches for all our kids that were remote. If we had to do that, I'm sure we can arrange, for grab-and-go lunches. Support staff may need to be reassigned, right? So just because the school is closed down, we have custodians, we have paras, we have bus drivers, we may need to reassign people potentially to another building to help out or to other responsibilities. So, Callie and Matt and I and Sarah and Tracy, and we've spent a lot of time talking about what do these contingency plans look like. And Greg's included in this too. So what if we don't have enough bus drivers? We might have to cancel a route. Doesn't mean we have to shut down schools. But we might have to figure out a way to prioritize, you know, maybe our long distance routes, and maybe the kids that are riding inside the 3-mile radius, we don't have a bus for them that day. We can communicate that. We have mass communication tools, we can do those kind of things. What about food service? Well, I talked to Janet, she's like, oh, I got you covered. No worries. We can close down one of the high schools. We can move everybody to the central kitchen. We can make 200 peanut butter sandwiches in an hour. We can feed kids at the high school and still keep our central kitchen open and providing food for all of our elementary buildings and some of the outlying districts that we support. All right. Custodial maintenance grounds. What if we don't have enough, right? So as I sit here and imagine worst case scenarios, I'm imagining the cleaning team at Kalispell Middle School all sitting around together having lunch during their lunch break. And someone gets sick and they all get sick or whatever, so we don't have a cleaning team. Well, we're probably gonna have to shift some people around to cover what we can. And then we may have to tell our staff, you're gonna have to pitch in and help out. If you want your garbage emptied and your tabletops clean, you might have to do that. We're gonna focus on bathrooms and high contact areas, common areas, those kind of things, but we can do it. I mean, I'll go clean a building, I don't care. Whatever we need to do. Paraprofessionals. If we don't have paraprofessionals, if we don't have substitutes, probably less support in the classroom. our paras do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to monitoring lunches and recesses and doing those kind of things. We may be shifting that to teachers when we don't have enough. But again, we're gonna come back and prioritize in some of our high needs, rooms, so like life skills or Aspire, I'm losing my voice, or other things like that. But we'll prioritize around those vulnerable populations. And Sarah will have a game plan, and she'll make sure that every kiddo is taken care of to the best that we can.
You're starting to grow.
I am. Certified teachers. Well, we had a substitute pool. We had them last year. They did a great job. They really came through for us. We still have that. We also have a 70% vaccination rate. So I'm not super worried about that part of it this year. But we also have comp time. We did a lot of that last year. We can continue to do that. We can reassign paras to cover for teachers. We pay them more, to do that. We may have to end up with temporary classroom closure and doing some kind of remote, in the worst case scenario. We are telling our administrators to communicate with their teachers, be prepared to go remote. Have your students be prepared to go remote. We have the technology, we have the infrastructure, we have, software platforms, we have what we need if it came to that. Even reassigning instructional coaches, but what happens is whenever you start to lose something, something else has to give. So that's the trade-off in all of this. So the student side of this, and that's probably the side that I'm most concerned about, right? We're gonna come to school, we aren't requiring universal masking. We have a Delta variant that's more contagious. What's gonna happen with our students? That's the one that I don't know. And when you look nationally at what's happening in schools that are closing and large population and urban populations and even small populations, people were not prepared for this. I think even in June, I was like, oh, this is gonna be an amazing year, like, we're past COVID, let's move on, like, everything's great. And it still is great, but we have to consider this. So we propose an instructional plan that's, to address potential for isolation and quarantine. Worst case scenario, we anticipate higher rates of absenteeism due to isolation, and if people heed the health department's request to quarantine. So it's not a mandate right now that you quarantine if you're a close contact. So down at the bottom, you can't see it, but, on
Hey,
it.
Micah,
Yeah,
so if it's advised from the health department, can we mandate it at the school district?
can we?
Yeah.
No. According to House Bill 702, that would be discriminatory. But that's where Missoula is saying, hey, we're gonna take the fight.
So even vaccinated, unvaccinated, like if someone says, hey, you've been in close contact, you need to quarantine, but this is the advice, we can't still mandate whether you've been vaccinated or not?
No.
People can actively know that dad's sick and the student can come?
But if we do it regardless of quarantine, we can, if we do it regardless of vaccination steps, we can say everybody.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's either, the way it's being interpreted right now is it's either all quarantine if you're close contact or none. But the CDC says, if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. We advise you to wear a mask for 14 days, but you don't have to quarantine. So we've got some challenges there.
But that was to my question, are we going to mandate that even if you've been vaccinated and you're in close contact, you need to stay home?
No. That is not the guidance from the county health department right now. And part of that reason is when we open our doors, right? So September 1st, all the kids come back to school. And if it's running through our buildings and everybody's like, we'll be shut down in no time. And that's really what's happening in those other areas. Montana's the only state that has that type of law. And so that's the concern, is that we would literally be shutting our schools down in a matter of no time. Yeah.
That's the reason we listed House Bill 702 as a barrier, is right now the county health department's trying to decision whether they have to choose all or nothing, like Mike was explaining. And remember, keep in mind that includes our staff. And so likely all of our staff would be, or the majority of our staff would be put in that, be the first thing that would shut us down. But the county still has responsibility to do something. They're not exempt, and so they're gonna be strongly advising people to quarantine. I just really put the county health department in a tough situation, and they're gonna start the year without it. So that was released today.
So can you remind me, when we had a mask mandate, if people were wearing masks, then they were not necessarily counted as a close contact, is that correct?
No. Last year, if you didn't matter vaccination status, mask or not, you had to quarantine. What they relaxed on was it started off as a 14-day quarantine, they shortened it to 10, and then they shortened it again to 7 days if you had a negative test after day 5.
And what is it that constitutes a close contact? It was like a certain amount of time?
It's cumulative 15 minutes or more, less than 6 feet.
Okay. And the mask didn't make, so it was just within the 6 feet?
Correct. What the CDC is saying now is that if 2 people, and it's exclusive of adults, this does not apply to adults, it only applies to kids, is that if 2 people are sitting next to each other, both are properly and consistently wearing a mask, if you are less than 3, if you're 3 feet or more away from that person, you don't have to quarantine. So, yeah.
So is that within the realm of something that we could have with the House Bill 207? Could we make more specific definitions of what a close contact is?
No, that's all coming from the CDC, which is then to state health departments, then to county health departments.
Micah?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt your flow, just thinking things through as you're talking. So there now, test kits are available in every drugstore. Do we have good tracking on testing? Or is testing mostly for going through the health department still? Or do we know? Do we have any idea?
Either the health department or Logan Health.
Okay, so people are not just buying things and testing that we're not aware, or we don't think that's a major
There are some that are
percentage?
available from like Walgreens and different things, but I don't know that they've actually been like approved.
Okay.
And I think the reason is because it can't detect between flu and COVID.
Okay.
It just says you have something.
I just wondered if the health department thought that was a large percentage of cases, or not really.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, so to address potential absenteeism, this is what we propose, is that in a typical year, we'd like to see it below 5%, right? That's the goal. On any given day, you're a good 8%, because you have kids that are getting braces and orthodontic checkups, haircuts, doctor's appointments, whatever. Kids are gone. Kids get sick, they stay home. Some kids skip school. I never, well, maybe just once, but, that's what you generally would see. And, so if we're at less than 10% average daily attendance for a week, so we would look at the entire week, we would just serve both populations like we normally would, right? So I have, as a teacher, and it says it's over here, what's realistic and sustainable for teachers? 10% of my kids out, I can probably manage. When it starts to go beyond that, it gets really hard to have a foot in both camps. So if I have 20% of my class out, and if I'm a high school teacher, I have 20% of each one of my 5 classes out. I'm dealing with a lot over here while also still trying to maintain instruction in my classroom. And we know, we try and have we ask our teachers to use high leverage teaching strategies and to do things that aren't just worksheets. We got kids partnering and working in groups and, cooperative things. So that gets to be a challenge for us. If we get into that 11 to 20%, we're telling our teachers, your focus is on the students who are in the building. The ones who are outside, we want you to get healthy. We want you to return as soon as you can. We want to take care of you. There is a disruption to learning, but we can manage that. And for a lot of teachers, they're going to have Google Classroom, but we don't want that to be this primary focus. When you think about it from middle school or high school perspective, if I have 150 kids and 20% of them are out, it's not just like, here, go into Google Classroom and do this. It's constant communication back and forth. I don't understand. I didn't get this. Where do I find this? It becomes a burden, and it's just not sustainable. And then if we get over 20%, absent for the entire school, we would consider remote instruction for a couple of weeks. So,
Will can go first.
go ahead, Will.
So that would be closing the school.
For 2 weeks.
Yeah,
But
And Mike, I'm still stuck on this lack of quarantining. So if we hit above 20%, those would be 20% of our kids that are out because of COVID.
yeah, that's where it gets hard, is trying to get granular on who's out for what reason.
Yeah.
You know, so kids out sick, right? We know that we have a portion of our population that doesn't get tested.
Mm-hmm.
We know we have a portion of our population that sends their kids to school sick. We have a whole variety of things, so really being able to pinpoint which kids are truly out for isolation and or were recommended to be quarantined, or advised to quarantine, it's gonna get really hard.
Yeah.
But this is, and just so you know, we started off at about 40%. And then talking with, Joe Russell and, you know, just through this attendance stuff, he's like 15%. I landed at 20% because we always have kids out for a variety of reasons. But he would be really concerned that if 20% absent rate, so if you take Edgerton alone, that's 100 kids out. Those are pretty significant numbers. When you look at Flathead High School, 309 students out at 20%. And again, it's 309 students times 7 periods. So we're not talking small potatoes when we get into those numbers, but I wanted you to see what that looks like. So even at 15%, that's a lot of absenteeism. And I would say right now, I don't know, this is just kind of proposed. This is our best thinking to this point, but really getting down to what will actually happen is really going to be dependent on what happens. With, you know, if we look at trends that are happening nationwide, it's not inconceivable in a county with low vaccination rates, without mask usage, that we would end up being in this position.
Micah, last year, did we approach any of these numbers? I mean, again, the quarantine, I think we probably exceeded these numbers.
Yes. Yeah,
But not just
So a great example was the middle school. I mean, it ran through 7th grade like nobody's business. And it wasn't just sick kids, it was the quarantines, the ensuing quarantines that happened with that, where we were up in that 30% of an entire grade out for any given period of time. And it's not like everybody goes out at once, it's just this constant, you know, in and out with kids. And then you have the ones that were quarantined multiple times, as a result.
Do you, in your opinion, think that we need to have any concern that basing it on percentage of kids that aren't there for closing down the school could encourage parents to send their kids to school sick? Because they wouldn't want.
Well, or when I thought about it, like, from our high school kid, like, hey, school's gonna close if we all are absent. But again, you know, the consequence to school closing, even at the middle school and high school, is the activities stop. You know, there's, you know, and I guess that's part of my frustration with this. And if Joe Russell says, hey, we're gonna quarantine all close contacts unvaccinated, that's a huge number of our kids. And if you have the Delta variant, which is more transmissible, I would anticipate if we went that direction, it would happen faster.
You think it will reach the 20%? You think there's a possibility that we'll reach the 20% quicker with close contacts than we felt with absence? Okay.
You know, I look at that 20% and I think about, let's go with 5%, 5 to 8, maybe even 10% at any given point for any different reason. But if the other 10%, or I'm sorry, the other half of that 20% are out for illness reasons, that's probably the best quarantine you can have, is to shut school down. Because if you think about if they did go into school with this stuff, We're not talking quarantines anymore, we're talking they are sick.
And if it's 1 to 3, that takes you 20%, 60%, right?
20% might be a bit high myself, but.
Yeah, and so you can, I mean, as you guys are discussing this and asking the questions, you can see how complicated it becomes for us. But I would also say that there are other, special circumstances, and we certainly experienced this last year, where a staff member working with, like, the life skills students was positive, and, you know, so we were gonna end up quarantining, 18 out of the 20 kids. Makes sense, we're just gonna shut the program down for a couple of weeks. But we also have some other considerations with ag ed, house construction, we've got some other things that we have to look at as well that, shutting down for 2 weeks may not be the only option that we have. And so we just have to, there's a little bit of a wait and see and a little bit of, let's look at what we have, but you can see how hard it is to put in a metric that says this is the definitive point where this happens. And so, again, they would go back to Joe Russell, how many of these kids that are out are actually in isolation? How many of these, what excuses are parents giving when they're excusing their kid from school? Are they sick? Do they have the sniffles? Do they have, whatever it is? And we're telling parents, please keep your child home when they are sick. Whether you get tested or not, you believe in it, don't believe in it, just keep them home. That's what we're doing for the greater community. So then the question came up, at what point would we consider implementing masks? Right? That seems to be the message that we hear from our healthcare providers and is, do we consider masks? Do we do it never? Do we do it before we hit 20%? Do we do it after we hit 20% and we've had to close a school down? Those are the interesting questions. So, in light of everything that I've shared with you, the data, kind of our worst case scenario, I feel really confident about where we're at from a staffing perspective. There might be some reduction in services in some areas for a temporary basis. But what we're gonna ask you to do is continue to keep masks strongly recommended for K-12 students, staff, and visitors. And that's a message that we want to continue to hit home. Recommend that you approve early release on Wednesdays. We did this last year, and, we sought feedback from our administrative team, asked Lynn and Anthony with KEA, kind of their thoughts on it, and there's some mixed reviews on this. There are people who are like, if you go 30 early releases at an hour and a half, I just lost, 45 hours of instructional time, I get that. But at the same time, if our staff is having to deal with quarantines and isolations, and who knows what the next rule or change from the CDC or the county health department, or even what our own, county data is going to show long-term, we feel like we need to be out in front of that and support our staff in being able to do that. We're asking a lot of them. They are doing the yeoman's work when it comes to educating our students. We also recommend that you approve the opt-in rapid testing at our school sites. So getting back to the testing question, last year we had access to Binax Now rapid tests. We put them over at our Care Here facility. Staff and their dependents could go in and get a rapid test. If you test positive with a rapid test, you still have to go get a PCR test. If you test negative, the likelihood that you're negative is really good. But working with the state, Governor June Forte pumped in $37 million to have testing available in all school sites, public and private. So we want to take advantage of that. Sarah Cole and I are working on, we're meeting with a nonprofit that helps organize and structure, and we just don't have enough information from them yet. We have that meeting on September 9th, 8th or 9th, I think, and to get more information. But there is an opt-in form. It's not required. We're not surveillance testing. We're not doing that kind of stuff. We just want people, if a kid goes down to the nurse's office, I don't feel good, can we call the parents and say, hey, can we give them a rapid test just to confirm? If they say no, fine, you're still gonna have to come get your kid, but we can give them a test right here on site. If staff wanted to do surveillance testing, get tested every week just for their own safety and protection to know where they're at, we can provide that. Consider a, expanded remote instruction opportunity for K-6. We currently have a model. It's very limited. It's for vulnerable population. But if people in our community here, we're not gonna require masks, and kids aren't gonna be required to quarantine if they're a close contact, leaves people feeling unsafe. I've heard that. And so if we do have to do that, we're probably looking at a model where we outsource it. So similar to what we're doing at the high school and middle school level, we're outsourcing to BYU, Montana Digital Academy. There are other companies and programs out there. It's not the same as having a synchronous instructor, but it is something that we could provide.
Micah? Is it K through 6? I thought the things that came out about the,
That was one
remote
through
was
six,
1 through
but
6.
this would be
This would be
expanding
K
it.
through 6.
Yep.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. And then consider allowing a hospital or county health department to conduct vaccination clinics at our school sites. If vaccines become available for elementary students, I want to be able to support that for anybody who wants it. You don't have to do it, we're not requiring it. It would be okay to have, if the county health department said, hey, we'd love to come into Peterson School, we'll come in on this day. Anybody that wants it, they can schedule it, and do that. So I wanted to come back to just some of the board policies related to health. So immunizations and those kind of things. We already do a lot of this stuff, right? We already offer vision screening, dental, scoliosis, hearing, and immunizations is included in that. But I would like to include testing for COVID in the but not limited to category, which would be completely allowable by law and board policy. Want to point out on student immunizations, there are immunizations that are required by law, unless you have a religious exemption, which we do have some of those. But COVID vaccinations are not included in that. They're not part of the required immunizations to attend school list. So I think that's an important distinction on that. And then policy 3417 about communicable diseases. If a student is sick at school, we have the right to exclude them temporarily from school until they're no longer symptomatic.
Micah?
Yep.
If somebody tests positive for COVID, do they then have to quarantine?
Yes, you have to isolate. So quarantine is I've been exposed, isolate is I'm a positive.
Okay.
So they would still have a mandatory 10-day isolation period.
And how will we know if somebody tests it? Like, is that because there's like the privacy issue? Does the health department or whoever tests them notify the school?
Yep.
Okay.
And then we gather the information, we send it to the students' names, never revealed to anybody. None of that is public information. And so process would be I test positive. Joe Russell, a contact tracer, contacts the school, says, hey, Mike Dale was positive. We need to know who they were sitting with at lunch, who they were with on the bus, what classrooms they were in. We need your seating charts. We send it back to them. They say, here's the kids that we've identified. Now we need their contact information, and we give them the parent contact information.
Mike, just clarification on one distinction about the letters that went out last year from the principal. That's gonna be different this year, correct?
There is no letter coming from us.
I just want you to clarify that.
Yeah. So all contact tracing will happen by the county health department. So next step is to consider our recommendations and provide approval. I have a communication plan. It's ready, depending on what the outcome of some of the decisions are tonight, to go to parents. And hopefully you've had some questions answered, but also give you an opportunity to discuss any of the things that we talked about tonight with any of us administratively. Jack, you're excused.
Micah, have you heard any more on, the federal mandate on masks, or masks in buses?
Yeah, so that is still, so on buses, people are required to wear a mask, no questions asked. If a student gets on a bus, we're telling our bus drivers, don't engage. If they're refusing, we'll have masks on buses, we'll pay, you're required to wear a mask on a bus. If they don't, the building administrator will get that student's name, there'll be a conversation with the parents, and it's either you ride the bus with a mask or you don't ride the bus at all. And that goes for any activity, transportation for BOAG, or any of it. And just so the board knows that if we said, hey, we're not gonna do that either, if we get reported and it's investigated, it's a $25,000 fine per day. So we're not messing around on buses. If a parent says, my kid's not wearing a mask, period, you're not getting on the bus. We are under no obligation to provide them transportation. Even for a student on an IEP who has that as a related service, we'll find another accommodation.
Like, really quick, there's just a couple of exemptions, and they're so limited, but for our students in life skills programs who may be non-ambulatory, and it'd be unsafe or with kids freezing to wear masks, those kids would be exempt, but it's so, slim, the kids who would qualify for federal exemption.
Okay, Mike, and then my question, what did Missoula schools, you said you heard from Missoula schools right before this meeting?
Yeah,
What did
so,
they do in 702?
well, it's interesting because talking to Joe Russell, our county health director today, every county is doing something different. Gallatin County said, we're not even gonna contact trace. Missoula's saying, we're gonna contact trace and we're going to follow the CDC guidelines that unvaccinated people will be required to quarantine, vaccinated will not. And so Joe's trying to strike a balance, I think, between requiring everybody to quarantine or not, and advising people to quarantine. And I think the message that comes from the board and from myself is, if you're a close contact, do the right thing. I mean,
Do the right thing.
and that's the part that's frustrating for me, is that I feel like we're held over a barrel. And what's at stake is keeping our schools open.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, anger is probably a good word.
So Mike, I can see a place where a student would come in, they find out they're ill, so they have to isolate. A teacher would be a close contact.
Yep.
And they could get a call and say, hey, the recommendation is that,
It's advised that you,
it's advised that we quarantine. Will we be supporting that?
that's a hard one, because under House Bill 702, you don't discriminate based on vaccination status. So technically, I don't know what the vaccination status is Joe Russell does, because everybody that's been vaccinated has been entered into a system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, would Joe advise someone who's been vaccinated to quarantine, or would he advise someone who has been unvaccinated to quarantine?
I don't know Joe that well.
But you see the position that puts him in, and health departments are not indemnified. They don't have any top covers, they don't have any protections when it comes to this.
I mean, I can only deal with the current recommendations, right? And I believe the current recommendations are 14 days of masking for close contacts for the unvaccinated, but if we made that a policy for vaccinated and unvaccinated, I mean, our only problem is implementation and, you know, will it reduce testing and,
You don't know, yeah, we don't know who is.
but I think we could put in a policy, regardless of vaccination status, that if you're identified as a close contact by the health department, that we require you to mask in the buildings for 14 days. And again, the problem with that is enforcement and finding out, you know, only the people who care will do it, but, I at least,
I think we're, and I hear what you're saying, but I think you will still get challenged if we have a policy that says we're going to treat kids who are unvaccinated different than vaccinated.
no, I said do it across the board. Say, if you're a
Anyone
close
with
contact,
Any close
vaccinated or
contact.
not vaccinated, mask in the building, 14 days. Because that would get us around the teachers being able to still teach and stuff. And maybe that's a long-term thought.
I'm gonna let Matt weigh in here.
That's a really good comment. We feel like we've roundtabled all of this stuff like 50 times, and so it's just hard to keep all of the different scenarios and what ifs straight. But we've talked about something similar to this, and at some point it becomes this management problem for teachers and principals. And so especially in middle school and high school, when you have kids moving periods all the time, if you have 30 kids in one grade level that have been identified as a close contact, and we're requiring those 30 kids now to wear a mask, and keeping track of those 30 kids every period, probably not a realistic option.
And there's privacy issues then too, I hadn't thought about the
Yeah,
privacy
and
issues.
then how do you keep that kid identified all day long?
Opt-in.
But we have some different systems for isolation, keep those kids identified in the system, because those is still required from the county. And so they show up in the system, teachers know why they're absent. But as far as kids are just identified, it would probably be a logistical challenge.
I have one other question. This is like a legislator question. If the legislators realize that this bill was a mistake and is not benefiting school districts, how often do they meet? Like, when could they possibly see that this is not advisable?
Next session.
When's that?
Session,
And
2
that's
years.
2 years.
Yeah.
So this bill is a 2-year bill.
Yeah,
Well, it could get challenged in court.
potentially the only thing that could happen is it gets challenged by a school district,
And so like Missoula is kind of doing that.
or, well, maybe, I think they're just waiting to be,
But they can be like, oh, emergency meeting, we blew it?
no.
No, okay. Just wondering.
Micah, federally, it could be overturned as well? Not that
Well, federally, they could mandate K-12 public schools, where, just like on buses,
yeah.
they could do that.
Micah, it seems like, one of the things we need to do is promote community engagement. And I'm thinking that if on our website, we had some kind of graphic that showed that we're creeping up to school closure. And, at the same time, some of the things you can do to help, you know, if you have a student who's sick, keep them home, that helps. You know, kind of a list of what the community can do to help out. But if there's a place where the newspaper, for instance, can see, oh, we're getting close to 20%, whatever we decide, that could help.
Any other questions for myself or the administrative team?
I have one for you. Great.
Oh. I thought we talked about all these.
Like 800 times. I think there's a strong, message in the data in tonight's presentation, and because there was a lot of data, I, don't want it to be overlooked. And I'm gonna zip back here a minute, and there were 3 slides that, to me, just spoke volumes. And, is that the slide, Micah, that shows that if you're vaccinated,
No.
it goes
Down, other direction.
other way?
Right,
Right.
no,
That
that
one.
one.
I love this slide. This is huge. Because those numbers don't lie. It's real clear that, if you get the vaccination, it's showing that the positive rates are, significantly go down. And that speaks volumes. The other slide to me, was this one. And to me, and Micah, correct me if I'm wrong, to me that shows there really isn't a significant uptick in positive cases, that we've been pretty much
There,
stable.
yeah, it's pretty stable. I think the question is that, you know, that average of 3.11 cases, that's for the last 2 months, and our kids have not been in school. That's the concerning one for me, is what happens when we put 6,000 students in our buildings.
And when I was growing up, there was always an expression about keeping your finger in the dam. And a little bit, that's what this pie graph shows. We are little slides of the total county population, and that's what we're up against.
Yeah, so asking schools to universally mask when we don't see it in our community it's a stretch. You know, I agree, masks have a layer of protection. I don't disagree with that. What I struggle with is the divide that it creates for our community.
Micah, though, in my experience, that first 2 months when school opens up, it just goes through the community. I mean, you can be, have a full office for 10 months of the year. In those 2 months, you're gonna have 15–20% people out because there's kids are in school, and I mean, it just becomes a factory for a spread. So I'm thinking that masking would be great, but, you know, it's not really possible.
Well, masking is possible, isn't it? We could mandate, sorry, we could have a mask mandate. That is one of the things we could still do. We could have a universal mask mandate.
Yeah,
It's the quarantines that are harder.
but also with this Delta variant, masking isn't as effective as it was with the wild variant.
Well, is it not as effective, or is the Delta variant just more contagious? Like, is it equally effective, but the Delta variant is more contagious?
Yeah, that could.
Micah, did you want to also just talk about the, how we're going to be dealing with the staff as it relates to COVID leave? That they'll be using their sick leave balances?
Yeah, I can. I didn't bring that up. So when the pandemic started, we had the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, FCRA, which provided leave, additional leave benefits for employees and employers. And then that expired in December of that year. And we made the decision as a board, as a community, that we would provide some additional extension to that, relative to quarantines and isolations. Moving forward into this year, not knowing what the quarantine orders are going to be, or we kind of do now, but there's too much up in the air for us to be able to say, hey, we can provide these extended leave benefits. The other part of it is get vaccinated. You can make that choice. If you want to gamble it, you can. You have sick leave. Granted, not every employee has, you know, days upon days upon days of sick leave. Our new employees, you know, start with 12. You know, and that's a hard one because you have a group of kids who don't have the ability to be vaccinated, who are likely going to need a parent at home. You know, so you think about our young teachers with young families and what that impact could be for them. It just seems like everywhere we turn, there's just another obstacle or hurdle that gets in the way. But we have to be able to operate. We have to be able to conduct business. We put extra money into sub bonuses, trying to do things that will entice people to come work for the district. But at the end of the day, we can only do so much.
We also will have the opportunity for remote work on a case-by-case basis. So if we do have a teacher that has to quarantine due to a young child who is a close contact with or gets sick, they would be able to work remotely. We do have some conditions around that, so they can't just be doing lesson plans. They would have to actually they'd actually have to teach their full curriculum for that day. Or for that.
They would have to be synchronous.
Yes. So we still have that support, but just not supplementing their leave.
The slide that's on the overhead projector, the screen there, the 5 bullet points, the first bullet you've already done.
Mm-hmm.
The next 2 bullets actually are action items on today's agenda. The last 2 are for potential future considerations. We have a past, an immediate, and a future look on some considerations.
Oh, I did have a couple. I'm down to just a few more questions, if that's okay. The first one should be simple. One of the things you mentioned, if we have massive absences among the teachers, is switching around, and I assume that's safe within our MOUs and our agreements with the union, and that that's been worked out, or you believe will work out well?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know, simple, but, in the expanding the K through 6, the outsourcing model, some of the concern with that is the lack of ability to, vaccinate, and we do believe that the option to vaccinate will be out probably, certainly by December, we'll probably have that age group able to be fully vaccinated, maybe a little earlier. What's the vision for coming back, or would there be, how would it, in your view, once you're outsourced, are you out for the year, or has that not been fleshed out yet?
Matt's gonna answer that one.
Definitely in elementary school, it's easier to come back. I think the challenge is probably on the front end of getting kids enrolled and when those different online programs begin. When we've sent out communications, what we're asking parents to do right now, if they're planning on being in a remote option, is commit to a trimester, and then it's just a cleaner, transition time. But in the event we had to outsource into a different program, I think we could, easily get kids back.
And I guess the last one was more of a comment. You had a slide about at what point do we consider, universal masking? To me, it's obvious before closures. I mean, our main goal is to have in-person learning, so the after we have to close is not where I would tend to be. And I know I asked for any metric. I feel 20% is high. Somebody else said 20% might be high to them too, but we also have to see trend lines. I mean, I'm hesitant about a solid number, and I more want to see 3 weeks of increasing case. You know, if we see increasing absenteeism for 3 weeks, starting at 8% and going up to 15 or something like that. But to me, it's what direction we're going. You don't want to close schools right as or mass schools right as you're starting to go down. Right, so to me, it's more about that trend line, and are we going up within the schools or down then?
Yeah, well, I think certainly looking at our case data for within Kalispell Public Schools, again, this is countywide, and so we don't know if, where we're at. We don't know if the vaccination rate is higher for KPS students than it is in Columbia Falls or Big Fork, and we probably never will know that. But these are the numbers that I think I would be looking at, in terms of metrics. If we start, if we open up schools and 2 weeks later, the average cases per day, starts jumping up into 5, 6, in the student population, that would certainly be a metric that I would look at, in terms of bringing any kind of recommendation to the board. And then, couple that with the attendance data. There's always going to be some holes in that, but we're going to try and make the best decision we can with the information that we have and what we're actually seeing.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
I appreciate you putting this, presentation together. It's really gonna help me make some decisions tonight, so thank you guys for doing that.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it's good that we hear this all together, and we have the chance to ask questions of Micah. It was, again, an information item, but we will have some decisions to make tonight based on this information. We have, recommended keeping masks, strongly recommended, K through 12 students, staff, and visitors, and we can move on from there, okay? Micah, are you ready for the next
We just need, gotta get.
COVID testing consent form, which is an action item? Only if it's an action item. while we're waiting for Callie to,
Jason, you get it.
we have, I see one member of the public out here, and I know I talked to you on the way in. Could you remind me of your name? Devin Decker. Thank you, Mr. Decker. And, you know, our procedure is during information items, we don't take public comment. It's just information to help us make these decisions. But we do have the public weigh in on the action items, which we list on the agendas, and then we have the public comment at the very end. So I encourage you to write down those questions.
Yeah, I was writing down, in fact, the question I had was partially answered, but I suppose
Okay.
there may be more.
Good, glad to hear that. Okay, thank you.
Consent form.
Do we,
Thank you for waiting.
yeah.
Okay, so what I'm asking, the board to approve tonight is a opt-in consent form that our nurses and, front office staff, can, distribute to parents if parents wanna opt in for COVID testing. It's a form that was actually developed by another AA district. We basically just added KPS, and by we, I mean Beth, to the form. And so basically it gets a little bit of demographic information, but then, if you want to scroll down a little bit, Kelly, it kind of outlines the legalese of this consent form.
Micah, would this be sent out at the beginning of the year to all families, or just as needed?
And, you know, we could actually send it out to everybody, and if anybody wanted to opt in right away, we could do that. And then I would think that, you know, as nurses, you know, if they're providing the testing, that they would be able to have that option to call parents, say, hey, Johnny's sick, and we can get him tested if you want. If not, it's okay. You still need to come pick him up, but.
And, sorry, just to clarify, the plan, if we were doing this, it would be with kids that were feeling a little bit sick, or would we do it, like, just to get baseline numbers?
Well, I think there's an option in there, and again, Sarah and I have to get a little more information from, the providers, on whether or not they would have enough tests to be able to just do surveillance testing. So if it was staff or, you know, adults we don't need an opt-in form, but we have that available for all of our adults. But then for the kids, I think you know, even if I was just, I got a sniffy, you know, a runny nose, can I get tested? Sure, yeah.
Micah, this is Heather. I've got a question.
Hey, Heather.
Hi, so if we're having them fill out this form, we're going to have another form sent back out when they come back from Christmas break, because we'll no longer be using the PCR test. And this Bionex Now, is that like a rapid test?
Yes, it is a rapid test.
Okay. So we'll just have another form drawn up when we come up with another test to replace the PCR test?
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think it really matters what the test is.
So
We're
are
just
we
trying to
gonna-
identify that it
Okay.
is for COVID.
So are we gonna ask for these and just have them on hand, or would we keep them, say, in the health department or the nurse's station, so when mom or dad comes to pick up the sick child, they can fill out the form and have it?
Yeah, I would say either they could do it, pre-fill it in advance, and the nurses can have that. We would just keep a file for that. There's probably a way that we could note it in Power School without having to go through, you know, let's just say Flathead High School, 1,300 students to see if we have it. And then if something changes, you know, at any point, we can always adjust and modify the form.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Good question.
Any other questions by board members? Okay, this is an action item, so I will open it up to public comment if anybody has a comment.
Yeah, well, I don't think any of the microphone actually.
For the people online, it's not for,
Okay, I'll use the microphone.
thank you.
You need me to state my name again, or
Nope, I got
Yep.
it. Thank you, sir.
this on?
There should be a button.
Is it on now?
I don't think it's turned red.
Hey.
Sounds-
So, I think this is a great idea, consent form. However, we go to that second page of the consent form. Number 11, I guess it's the third page, number 11 there. So, who is responsible in the event that a child or a student, is injured during this test? Because we know that happens sometimes. This last year, it was in the paper that an adult got tested at the hospital and went way too far up into the nose, actually hit the individual's brain. That was anyway. So who is responsible if this is gonna say that, we aren't responsible? Does that make sense? I was wondering if that possibly answered now, or something I could get back onto?
I'm just gonna go out on a limb that by providing the consent, the parent assumes responsibility for that.
Right. Well, I just wanted to clarify on that. And I'll save this one for the next. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sue, I'd like to make a motion to approve consent form for student COVID testing as presented.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
Seconded?
Thank you, Rebecca. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the COVID testing form. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Heather. It has been, approved unanimously.
Are you, wait, was it, did she say aye?
She did say aye, yeah. Okay,
Before we move on, Heather, can you please clarify that that was I for approving the form?
Yes, that was I.
Okay, thank you.
okay, next item, the modified schedule for 2021-22. This is also an action item.
We are coming in front of the board this evening to, seek your approval for a change, a modification in the school calendar that would include 30 additional early releases. And the reason for that is so that we are prepared to manage whatever we're gonna have to deal with this year and truly support our staff by giving them that extra bit of time. The way it's looking, we are gonna have, students in isolation, we're gonna have students in quarantine, and, for our teachers and our staff to support those students, the way we wanna support students at the adequate level, we need a little extra time to get that job done. I have included a calendar so you can actually see what that looks like. And, when you originally approved this year's calendar on February 9th, we had 9 early release days total in there. And those are in red, and so you'll see that there are some early release days that are tagged for other events. They don't have anything to do with early release professional development. What we're asking for this evening is to add 30 more on. And specifically, when you look at this calendar, they are the days that we have on Wednesday where the font is red. The very first early release for this school year, already approved by the board, is scheduled for Wednesday, September 15th. That is for professional development. After that, then we start to pick up, if you approve it this evening, those additional early release days. We've learned some lessons from last year, and what we'd also ask is that we have a little flexibility. Best case scenario, let's say that the board approves the early releases, but we get to second semester and we find out, you know what? We really don't need these early releases. We're fine. If we could have a little flexibility, we'd come back, have a redo and say, you know, we're good. We also would ask that there be some flexibility that we would flex an early release once a month for professional development. That if it looks, I'll just use October as an example. We didn't have an early release professional development built in October, but we'd like the flexibility to tag one of those, or professional development, or a faculty meeting, or things like that, if we're doing fine with the task at hand with the COVID responsibilities. COVID responsibilities will have number one priority. The last early release that you approved was for May 25th, and what we would do is we would add one more, and that is on June 1st. The last day of school for this calendar school year is Friday, June 10th. We do have policy, which I provided in your packet, that allows us to still meet the aggregate hour requirement. So we're good to go on that.
Callie, is it disruptive to have 2 early releases within a week? I know there's a couple in November, I think one in April and one in January, where, yeah, in January, it looks like we have one on a Wednesday, the 19th, and then the 21st. And I just wondered if that would be disruptive to the classroom, and if it's better on the weeks where we already have an early release to just let that be the only one, or if, yeah, just your thoughts.
Ideally, it'd be nice to have it just one a week. What we know, though, is if I, for example, cancel the one altogether on the 19th, we're creatures of habit, and it's much easier to have our students just know every single Wednesday we have early release. It also allows our parents to know every single Wednesday I have to make sure I have childcare or something. It's just a cleaner model with that.
Gotcha, thank you for the clarification, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying that anytime you disrupt the typical school day with an early release, it's always a disruption.
I have a question. Last year, I know that you wanted to talk to Mark Friedline about the Parks and Rec, the after-school activities. Have you worked it out to make sure that that's all in line? Is there? Okay. Wonderful.
That's one more thing on the COVID director's checklist. One of the other pieces to this, and we experienced it a little bit last year, and you know, when we initially started with the early releases, I was pretty adamant that you know, activities were going to be secondary to early release days. We have told our administrators that if this is approved, that we would allow activities to happen immediately after school. It's just a lot of disruption for parents to come pick my kid up from school, drive him back 2 hours later for a 1-hour practice, go home, come back. I mean, there was a lot of disruption to that. So that was a little bit of a give on my part. You know, again, wanting that priority to be taking care of kids first in whatever their academic needs. But for those coaches that are also teachers, they know what that responsibility is. So if they choose that practice right away after school, they still have a responsibility to make sure that they're working with those kids after their practice is over. So
This was with the Parks and Rec program.
Yeah, I know, I just wanted to clarify on student activities within the district.
As a parent, I was the person advocating for, yes, keep them in school, because we can't take them home from school, get them back to school, that would be a nightmare. And actually, it ended up really working, at least for our family. We scheduled all of our orthodontic appointments and dentist appointments, knowing Wednesdays were free, we can do all that stuff. So, yeah, I've changed my mind about that one. I don't know if that affects anything, but I just thought you should know.
One of the other lessons that we learned from last year is we were surprised at the number of students that stayed on Wednesday to get help from their teachers. And there would be groups working together, and I heard one story over the summer where an international language teacher stayed in an area in the school, in high school, and just helped students. And the students weren't necessarily that particular teachers. They stayed, and it was Wednesday, and they got a lot of work done, a lot of catch-up work done.
Any other questions from board members? Mr. Decker, do you have a comment?
No, this one.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
So I'll move to approve the KPS calendar draft number 8 that includes 30 additional early release days.
Thank you, Scott.
Second that.
Thank you, Kim. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the KPS calendar draft number 8. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? How do you vote, Heather?
Aye.
Thank you. It has been approved unanimously. Let's move on to the work study topic.
All right. So our work study topic, ironically, is safe environment. And Sarah's actually going to join me for this presentation. Sarah actually, I was putting together the other PowerPoint. She's like, Mike, I'll take this one. But when we talked as a board during our retreat, one of the things that came up was, could we spend a little bit of time focusing on what our priorities are and share some information with you about what that looks like, starting from the board level and working down into the building level. And so I think it's important for the board to understand that on this safe environment, the intended outcome is that Kalispell Public Schools will create a climate and culture that makes each student feel valued, supported, and respected. That's what we came up with as a board and said, this is what we want to see out of this. And so then the question is, well, what does that actually look like? And when we think about student safety or safe environment, we often think about physical safety. But when we really look at the dimensions of what that means, there's also this emotional safety. We spend a lot of time, and coincidentally, our second priority is systems of support. So we end up spending a lot of time in that emotional area. But then there's also this cognitive safety as well. Are students safe to learn? Are they safe to explore, make mistakes, and do what we always do? And so I don't want to go through all of those, but I just wanted to touch on that when we look at it from a board perspective or from a school perspective, we aren't just talking about, has everybody been trained in run, lock, fight, or how to evacuate the building when there's a fire drill, or to duck and cover when there's an earthquake. So how does the board support, foster, and create an environment for this goal area? Well, it starts actually with your policies. Policies are a really big part of what school boards do, that and the budget we know. And from those policies, we generate handbooks. We can't cover every single little thing in a policy, and we really can't cover every little single thing in a handbook. And when you do start to do that, it becomes kind of oppressive, like, man, look at all these rules, and you're expected to know them all, and, but we always have these expectations for student behaviors. But then we also have these expectations for ourselves on how do we support kids in that. And a great example of that is the policy that dealt specifically with student discipline. And a couple of years ago, the board and Sarah and Mark worked on this policy that was very punitive in language, and it listed, you know, you can't bring nunchucks, throwing stars, you know, it was just a list of do not, do not, do not. And we kind of flipped that on its head and we said, what if we took a proactive approach to this? And we said, we expect positive behaviors, and these are the behaviors that we expect. And so we worked through that, and that's one area, an example of how we do that. And then every year, the board approves handbooks. They're important, right? We put in things about attendance, and we put in things about guns, and we put in things about academic honesty and all of those pieces. And so all of those things kind of start to work towards practices. And so what really happens in a school? What does that look like to go from policy to practice? And who are the people that support that? And I'm gonna let Sarah talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when Mike and I were kind of brainstorming with the team, like what does safety actually look like? Oh, thank you. In those dimensions, I even just look around the room and I look at Jason with technology and Greg with facilities and Tracy in HR. It's really outside the classroom. Every single one of us touch safety and ensuring a child's safety along those dimensions. And so we really try to be as proactive as possible. What can we do if that outcome is that every single child feels valued, feels welcome, feels supported? How proactive can we be in making that happen? And so, gosh, this could have probably been a 20-slide presentation around all the awesome things that we do in this district, but we just try to highlight some of the ones that probably have the biggest impact. So in terms of proactive strategies, I think number one is building authentic and trusting relationships. When I first got here 5 years ago, Stacey York was the keynote speaker for our very first day back. And I walked into this culture of educators wanting to understand kids, wanting to be trauma-informed, wanting to be restorative. And so I see people being really intentional about building relationships with kids, whether it's a bus monitor or someone in the kitchen, an administrator or a teacher. Explicitly teaching expectations and routines. So in our classroom, not just the content we teach, but it's how can we set groundwork for structure. We know that structure makes kids feel psychologically safe. They know what to expect. They know their routines. So we explicitly teach those expectations and those routines. So some examples, PBIS, you heard, someone said the language, be safe, be respectful, be responsible today. And so we teach to those. What does that look like in the hallway? What does that look like in the restroom? What does that look like in the classroom? The grade 8 is just another version of that. We see it at the elementary level, but explicitly teaching kids classroom routines. How can I be, one of the examples up here was around cognitive safety. Like, can I work in a small group and take a risk and say something and know that I'll be accepted? Grade 8 teaches to some of those things. How can I have that collaborative small support? I'm sure in this room right now, there are people who want masks and people who don't want masks, and how can we safely have a conversation around that and still be valued and respected? So that's what we're aiming for in our classroom. The other piece that you'll see is community circles often, whether it's a lit circle in a freshman English class at Glacier High School, it's a morning meeting in any of our elementary buildings during homeroom, or restorative practice circles. And so this is a place for us to really work on our social emotional skills, build community, and make sure that kids feel welcome and valued and safe. Our mentor programs, we have Brave Mentors, Wolfpack Mentors, programs like Ascent at Glacier that really ensure that kids are connected to something, that every kid has a connection to something. LEC, ATC, and Inspire, all the amazing things that Jody Barber and her crew are doing over at Linderman. So not just for, like, the LEC provides alternative education for students who are eligible and qualified, but we also have ATC and Inspire programs. So those kind of tier 2, tier 3 interventions for kids who need a smaller group environment. Our SOS teams, I won't get into this because I think it's goal number 2, and Micah and I and a crew of people will probably be back at it during the next 4 work session. But it's, again, really looking at what supports can we put in place for those kids who maybe would have traditionally fallen through the cracks. Can there be a check-in, check-out system for those students?
And I would add to that, sir, that there are other things that are programmatic within our schools as well. So home base at the middle school, and they have, set topics and things that they work through, specifically for middle school age children. There are, she kind of touched on this, but there are so many things that are going on starts to lump in CSCT and counseling services and, you know, some of those other things that are happening as well.
One last thing, and Matt, I ask that you just give us a quick kind of heads up on what this may look like, but, it's creating space. So when we look at that structure for it, we have to be intentional. We have to make space for some of these things to happen. And so Matt's piloting a program. Matt, if you just want to talk a little bit about SAP and what that's going to look like?
Sure, I think I've mentioned it in a couple of small groups. Student assistance program is an opportunity for kids to get together in small groups with two adults that have been trained to facilitate a group discussion on a diverse group of topics. And right now, we're piloting it at Glacier and Edgerton. And we put it out there and said, we're gonna have 3 training opportunities, and one of them started yesterday, and there's another one tomorrow. And those two go together. We're looking at about 10 between staff and community members that'll be trained. And then we set one up for Glacier, and we're kind of hoping for the same, you know, hopefully get 10 people, and we capped that training at 20 already enrolled. And so we'll be doing that training here in September. And we have another training going on at Edgerton. I think that one's full too. So when we talk about creating space, I think what Sarah's referring to is it takes a little bit of energy to get things like this off the ground and get people trained to facilitate the group. And the idea here is community members and staff working together to facilitate small groups with tier 2 type interventions so that our counselors and other support staff can take on some of the, and focus more of their attention on tier 3 without neglecting those needs that are, you know, still existed with those other issues.
Yeah, just another piece, just another layer of support that we're providing. And what I think is so awesome about it is we also have this goal around community and family engagement. And a big portion of the folks who turned out or who signed up for the training are really community members who are really interested in volunteering in our schools and supporting our kids. So it just feels awesome. It's great work. And then the next piece is really preventative and responsive strategies. So the trauma-informed and restorative discipline practices. We had 9 leaders, or administrators in the district, go through restorative practices training. And so there's the proactive piece of that, where you might see it as community circles. Then there's the reactive piece, and Mike has talked a little bit about that in our discipline policy. But you'll see more and more diversion to CRI-J. You'll see more and more our administrators kind of mediating conflict and really working towards repair in our schools. Run, Lock, Fight training, crisis prevention intervention is aimed at educators and administrators and nurses who work with students who might have higher levels of need for de-escalation. And so we've got crisis teams in each and every school that are trained and refreshed every year so that they can respond to that type of crisis. Our suicide task force work, Micah and I and Susan Sherman facilitated a suicide task force meeting last week. Last Thursday, and really this work has been in place, and I think, Micah, you shared, we've probably saved innumerable lives that we can't account for. And unfortunately, we've been grieving losses of kids recently, and so we brought this group together to say, what else can we do? How else can we network with Tamarack, Nation Foundation, stakeholders within district, Brave Heart Ministries, and we really just connected and collaborated around what else can we do? Is there anything else we can do to really provide suicide awareness, signs of suicide, and get our folks comfortable when they're in a space like staff, the student assistance program group, or they're in the counselor's office? How can we really see the signs and prevent and support kids? Critical incident response protocols. So our administrators are awesome, and they have protocols to respond to critical incidents, whether that's a car accident a student who got in a car accident, a student who passed away tragically, a family member. What we're talking about at central office is how can we support those building administrators? How can we really provide district level response so that if I'm Michelle Payne and I've just dealt with 2 tragedies at my school, how can we rally around Michelle and the Flathead community and make sure that they're taken care of? The community partnerships that Micah mentioned. So we've got SROs who do amazing work. I actually included a picture of one of our former SROs reading a book to elementary students. I think sometimes people think of it like, some of your guys, huh?
Isn't that the student teaching him to read?
I'll
tell
I think people think, the role of the SRO is to like nail kids who are getting into trouble, but really, the role of the SRO is to be preventative, to build relationships with kids. I see this over and over again with our police officers. In partnerships with CRIJ for diversion, we're actually increasing referrals to CRIJ. We'll be coming up with our 612 administrators to talk about that. We've got partnerships with Greater Valley Health and Logan Health for mental health services, and we're consistently expanding. Every year I have been here, we've expanded opportunities for mental health services. From a technology standpoint, we have an anonymous reporting app, we have BART, we have Handle with Care. So these are ways for people to reach out and say, I'm worried about somebody, please check in. Just a personal story, I'm being a little vulnerable here. I got a call from one of our administrators that said there was a BART alert I need to talk to you about. And oh my gosh, like one of our Aspire students, no, it was one of my children. One of my children put something in an email that wasn't totally appropriate. It got alerted on BART. Jason graciously, we have not had this conversation, although he's in the know. And it was such an eye-opening as a parent. It was such an eye-opening moment, like, oh my gosh, I really, this is an opportunity for me to talk to my kids about safety with technology. So just awesome stuff that we have in place to make sure that our kids are safe. Metrics has been a big point of discussion. How are we going to measure? What does this look like? And so we've got this goal with an intended outcome. How might we measure it? So I just wanted to give a quick example. In our district SOS committee, some of the work that was started last year that will continue is how can we collaboratively develop a meaningful climate survey to screen and assess needs of not only staff, but also students. That work could expand to families. Like, do you feel safe in the school? Do you feel valued? And we really want a tool. I think we've done this in the past, right? There's probably been several types of surveys that have funneled through our school district in the last probably several decades. The feedback that I've received on some of those tools is that they're long, they're not always responsive, we don't always get the data that we need from them, or they ask questions that we actually don't have the capacity to respond to. So our goal would be to create a tool that's clear, concise, and we have the ability as educators to actually respond to it. And so this is just a quick activity that we did with our SOS team, and we said, hey, throw out what are questions you would want to ask of you as an educator? What are questions you would want to ask your students to really check in on how they're feeling and how they're doing? And so we've started the work. I'm excited to continue the work this year and more to follow as what we're working on.
Well, this last slide, we just, some of the things that we talked about, but, even within our student population, there is some innovation around making people feel welcome. And like at Glacier High School, periodically, there's a group of students and teachers and administrators, and they had things like, be the solution month. And so one of the things they came up with is, we're just gonna line up the doorway as people are coming in, and we're gonna welcome them and tell them that they're valued and that we care about them. It's just those little simple things like that. You look at the team around a student graduation at Linderman, and you see signs like, you belong here when you walk into Edgerton. All of those little things build on the culture of a school and a district that say, when a parent comes to our school or a student comes to our school, they say, this is amazing, this is where I want to be, and this is a good place for my child to learn and grow up and be successful. So, any questions about how the board helps impact what happens at school through this priority?
I have one comment, is I am so glad to see that we are finally dealing with some of these social emotional issues, the kids in trauma, because they can't access the academics until they get past, all these other issues that they're dealing with. So I am really glad to see that we're building this right into our school culture.
just because you're always so fascinating, Sarah, and I love hearing your perspective on things. Just facts. The survey, is that also, would that also have a place in the proactive area, or just the were you talking mostly about slide 2? I love the idea of doing it for the proactive as well, like.
Absolutely, no, actually, it would be used as a way to proactively, so some schools are using them as almost screeners. So there'd be questions, just general questions to assess climate and culture, but there'd also be some questions, and there'd be a built-in measure for if a student or a staff member are responding, like, if there's flags up for several questions, that might mean an immediate, intervention by homeroom teacher, or school counselor, or administrator. And so, it's definitely proactive, we can do things better based on the data we have, but it's also reactive in that if certain students or staff members need help, we can respond.
And my other thing was just, again, I'd love to hear your take on it. You talked about how structure is really good for students, it gives them an understanding, and I completely agree with that, but that can be the other side of that too, where it can be a stressor if the structure is too tight, or if the student understands that structure to be too limiting. Is there, I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, and maybe next time I'm here, I'll share, there's a really awesome slide, it was something that we learned about in restorative practices training. They talk about 4 different types of practitioner styles. One is like the authoritarian, like it's super structured, my way or the highway, we're doing it. The other is 4, kind of the enabler, it's loose, it's wild, it's whatever. One is neglectful, like there's really no boundaries, I might be burnt out. And then there's a category called width, where there's high structure, but also high nurture. They actually put it in quadrants so you can see it. And that's, I think, what we're looking towards. High structure does not necessarily mean authoritative. It means there's boundaries, and then within those boundaries, there's creativity and collaboration and autonomy for kids. So,
awesome, thank you.
Did that help answer your question?
Absolutely, and if you'd send me that slide, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a question. So, have you found with the pandemic, that's like a bomb exploding in the community and in our schools, that the programs you put together were able to address that, so you didn't have to adjust them? Or have you found that in order to respond to some of the stresses from COVID, you've had to make adjustments to your program?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to, it's more important now than ever to continue to develop our programs so that kids do have safe space to be curious about their differences, to engage in conversation about their differences without it getting really heated. Another kind of layer to this will be Montana released social emotional learning competencies, which we can be integrating into classrooms and really explicitly teach kids. Like, how do I disagree with somebody but do it in a respectful way without shaming them, or how am I curious about somebody's differences? And so I think the programs we have really helped reduce the tension within the schools, but there's definitely room to grow. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sue, can I just add one last comment? I want to acknowledge, Sarah's contribution to the district. And, every once in a while, there's an individual that comes along that just has a burning desire and a passion for something that truly makes a difference. And Sarah's one of those people. And where we have been even 15 years ago or 20 years ago with this, compared to where this district is now, is truly remarkable and deeply, deeply touching and impactful to kids. And I give credit to Sarah. When she came on board, things started to move in a different direction. And I think we'd be remiss if, since this is the topic tonight, that we didn't acknowledge Sarah's contribution to this district. Truly, truly amazing. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay, moving on, we have our monthly financial reports. This is information only. Gwen?
Okay, Okay, so just a little light reading for you. The first two documents are the trustees' financial summary. That is trustees' financial summary, so that's your document. The business office prepares it on your behalf. And it just is a report to the Office of Public Instruction, county superintendent. Some of the information goes on to the federal government of all of our expenditures in the last year, you know. What were our budgets? Did we live within our budgets? What are our cash balances? The whole thing. So page after page after page of information, mostly numbers. So it does require approval by the Board of Trustees since it's your report. The report is submitted electronically, and then Sue has some cover sheets that she'll need to sign and we send in after the fact. So that's the first two. The last two are the budget reports, and that's the budget that you approved on the 11th of August. Again, there's an electronic report, so the trustee's financial summary has to be completed before the budget piece is completed, because the cash information rolls over from TFS into the budget report. So you can see that submit number on it. That has also, those reports, both elementary and high school, have also been submitted to the Office of Public Instruction, to the county superintendent's office, and dropped into the file that we share with the auditors. The trustee's financial summary is the document that they use for the base of their audit. So they take that document and then they review all of our backup documents to make sure that the information on that report is accurately reflects the position of the district. So, you've already taken action on the budget pieces, and later on in the agenda, you'll see a place to take action on the trustee's financial summary. So questions on those documents? Okay. There'll be a test later. Okay, I think that's it for me for now.
Okay. Thank you, Gwen.
Yep.
Tracy, Human Resources and Personnel.
Does anyone have any questions on the personnel action item?
Sue, I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Diane. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the personnel items. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Heather, how do you
Aye.
vote?
Aye.
Thank you. It has been approved unanimously. Let's move on to the next one. The assistant principal.
Yeah, so I'm gonna use this one on the mic. So in the previous board meeting, we did update you on the status of the assistant principal for KMS and their need for a intermittent medical leave of absence. And so this was discussed at last board meeting, and you did approve, to be able to hire, a one-year only assistant principal. And so we have made that hire, and so we're bringing this forward, for your approval tonight for this specific, position.
I assume he's got, administrative credentials?
Yes.
And is he from the KMS, school? Or where?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So he's known and he's fits right in. Thank you.
Is he currently in the Flathead Valley? I mean,
Yeah, he was actually a teacher at KMS,
oh, okay. Cool.
who has more administrative experience than I do. He'll be great. He'll be great.
Yeah, I know him, he'll be a great fit for that position, for that one-year position.
Okay.
Sue, I'd like to make a motion to hire, Mr. McCauley for a one-year, assistant principal, KMS, for 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Scott. It's been moved and seconded that we hire, Bob McCauley, is that his name?
Yep.
Bob McCauley for that position. All in favor, please say aye.
I believe it's just elementary.
It is.
Oh,
Noticing that.
okay.
Sorry, I'm always the district-wide girl, so I
Good.
apologize.
Good
It should
catch.
be elementary only.
Okay, elementary trustees only, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Heather, how do you vote?
Susan, high school.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Got us all confused.
Oh, easy to do. It has been, approved unanimously. Let's go on to the next one, ratification of custodial collective bargaining agreement. Tracy, this is still you.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to do is I want to recognize and thank the individuals who are part of our negotiation team, and that is Sue and Jack and JJ, Jack Junior. I'll tell you why I call him that later, but anyway. This was a very interesting negotiation group. I think when we gave you the original review of the, agreements that were coming up, we did reference that the custodial group would be a little bit challenging, just because this was probably the most, union intense language CBA that we have, meaning that a lot of the language in the CBA was, more of a benefit to the union than it was to be able, to the district. And so we've spent quite a few years trying to negotiate the language out with, I'd say, a little success each year. We seem to chip away a little bit this year, or each year, but this year we were able to come away with a very successful agreement on both sides. In addition, I just want to recognize this group of individuals for the tremendous work that they did, especially this last year, keeping our building clean and sanitized, going above and beyond, and just really putting in a tremendous effort. Along with that, we've been short-staffed with this union for a variety of reasons, and they picked up the slack and just really did a fantastic job. And so we have a lot of respect for our custodians in the district. We have a lot of love for our custodians in the district, and they just do a fantastic job for us. So the specific changes of this agreement are, you'll see the financial impacts. We did increase the first year. That's going to be one of the higher percentages that you see with the market adjustments. And the reason for that is because of how the matrix is set up. This is the only CBA that does not have, doesn't have percentages between their steps that are about 1 to 2, between 1 and 3%. Some of these percentages are just 1 cent and 2 cents per year. So it's not a typical matrix that you see that the steps are built in along with the COLA. It truly was just the COLA. And so we worked with the union and updated the matrix so that they have at least approximately 1% between each step. And then in addition to that, we put the market adjustment on that. And you also know from the beginning, or from last spring, I believe, that this is one of the groups that is very competitive in the local area. And so we were able to increase that a little bit. We were also able to get rid of the 6-month probationary period rate, which was about $1.50 below the actual standard rate. So it was kind of an initiation period. We were able to get rid of that. So the starting rate for this position now is around $16, which still isn't as high. It's still within, in between, kind of in the middle, but it'll definitely help us a lot. And then the COLA for 22-23 and 23-24 is the same as the other unions, especially the KEA. We modeled this after the KEA. And then you also have that 0.5% one-year only COLA adjustment in that third year. So with the financial impact, we were also able to get 2 key pieces of language out of the CBA. One was, to have more management discretion as it related to the shifts and as it related to the location and placement of the custodian. So that'll help us a lot. Prior language was that the custodian, the union, and the district all had to agree. So if we wanted to change a custodian's, let's say their, shift 15 minutes, instead of coming in at 3:15, we'd want them to come in at 3:30, we would have to have everyone agree to that, the union, the employee, and the district. And oftentimes, the union and the district would agree, and the employee would not, and so we didn't have a lot of flexibility there. And then the second piece of language that we took out, why am I going blank on that? What was the second?
Bereavement leave.
Oh, yes, thank you. So we had to modify the bereavement leave. The custodial union and the classified union are the only two unions in the district that have, a standalone bereavement bank. And according to Title II law, that's actually illegal. Bereavement needs to be used as part of your sick leave bank. And under Title II, you have to provide that benefit as written. You can't provide more or less. So if, Title II says that you get 12 sick days a year and 15 vacation days a year, and that bereavement needs to be taken out of your sick days, we have to comply with that law. So we were able to get rid of the bereavement bank, and then we did make some accommodations for those first-year employees, just in case they have a situation like this. They can request up to 5 personal days for the specific use of bereavement. So those were the two main things that we got out of. So we're very satisfied, and I think the custodians are really happy with the financial piece of this as well. Grace, did you want to add anything?
Go ahead.
The 6.1%, is that to everyone on all the steps?
No, it's an average, and so, when you look at the matrix, and I apologize, I should have had the matrix included in here. I had an error in it, so I was reviewing it real quick before I brought it in, and I didn't attach it. But if you look at the matrix, the people in the first 5 years would have maybe, $1 difference between step 1 and step 2, maybe 50 cents, maybe $1.75. And then in year 6, you'll see where it really dropped down to where it was only maybe 1 cent between steps, and 2 cents between steps. And so we actually base that average on the individual. So you might have one custodian that might be getting a 7% increase, and you might have one custodian that might only be getting a 1 or 2% increase. So it is not every single individual, and we did make that clear to the union. So their members they understand that expectation, especially if they're in the year 1 through 5, they will be receiving a smaller, adjustment as opposed to those people that have been in those, steps that are only getting 1 cent a year adjustment.
Any other questions from board members? Anybody care to make a motion?
I will, Sue.
Thank you,
I
Diane.
move to ratify the custodial collective bargaining agreement as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Kim, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Heather, are you still there?
Yes, aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Been approved unanimously. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Contracts, quotes, change orders. Gwen?
So this proposal is actually twofold. One of the first is a proposal to move from diesel buses to propane buses. And the second part of this request is to, approve for the purchase of 6 buses over the next fiscal year and an e-bus. So if you scroll on up, maybe somebody more in the know than I can speak to the propane. So scroll up, Kelly, are there some additional documents attached to that?
There's 23 pages.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, just scroll up there, there we go. Okay, Gray, Micah,
Well, what I could say is, in summary, as we talked about this at, Finance Committee, was that the cost per mile for a propane bus, aside from the benefits, from a, environmental standpoint, is that it, in the long run, will be cheaper to operate propane buses. This is something that we've looked at for a number of years. There's a lot that goes into this, because you have to have a filling station, you have to have access, those kind of things. As we're designing our new transportation bus facility, we're anticipating that. And really, the goal would be to, over the course of time, to shift from diesel buses to propane buses. The exception would be for over the road. Propane buses do not get as great gas mileage as a propane bus, or as a diesel bus. So our over-the-road buses will still remain diesel. But in the end, this was a direction that we thought was prudent. We didn't buy any buses last year. That's why the request for 6 of them. So we have the funds available to do this. And there's a lot more information, technical information, that everybody could read about. Does that summarize it pretty well, Ray? Okay.
okay, so, Kelly, to go back up to the actual document for that. So what Annie is requesting here is that she would like to go ahead and order one 80-passenger bus and 2 29-passenger buses immediately. There was a comparison in the documentation here of a cost of a propane bus, which are more costly than the diesel buses, but we want to start, moving in that direction. So she would like to purchase 3 buses right away. Then in October, the DEQ will be issuing some grant opportunities, and we've participated in those in the past, where they wanted to get, less efficient vehicles off the road, and so they'll give you a grant, and then you destroy the buses. So, we have destroyed the age of buses that fit the previous grants, but they're gonna have some new parameters on the grants in October. So when that grant information comes out, you'll see what we have that will fit into that, and we would make application for grants and then purchase the other 3 buses in line with the grant opportunity. And then also, for the first time, she would like to purchase a Class E bus, which is a vehicle, in this case, an expedition. And in not the last legislative session, but the previous one, the legislature approved being able to transport students in these Class E vehicles, and they do have a variety of safety, addressing the safety of transporting students in a smaller vehicle. So Annie would like to purchase one and see how that works for us. But it seems like it would have a lot of good use for us in the transporting sometimes of homeless students that might not actually be on a bus route, and so whole bus goes out to, or a large bus goes out to pick up, individual students here and there, and also some opportunity to transport smaller groups of students for a variety of things. So, the suggested motion is to approve the purchase of 6 propane buses and the Class E expedition during this fiscal year. And we do have the funds available in the bus depreciation fund. We have 2.7 million, and we're proposing to spend about 800,000. So we're in good shape there. Yes.
Question, for the Class E expedition, do people need a special license, or does a driver's license adequate?
Actually, I do not believe that they do not need the same licensure as they do to drive a bus.
Thank you.
Yes. So that gives some flexibility as well.
Any other questions? Is somebody comfortable making a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that we approve the purchase of 6 propane-powered buses and a Class E expedition during this fiscal year.
Thank you, Ursula. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Will. It's been moved and seconded. This is district-wide, so all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Heather, how do you vote? I know Heather did say she was gonna have to leave around 8 o'clock, so. Motion has been approved unanimously. Let's go on to the board agenda software.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna speak on Beth's behalf. Between Beth and Gwen, they put together most of the agendas. And we have had a number of technical issues with our agendas and the software company that houses them. Notably, connectivity issues, servers being down. It was so bad last year that they actually gave us this year free, which I don't know if that's like a good thing or not. So earlier this summer, I asked Jason Heacock to look at a variety of vendors to bring forward to a group that could examine what that would look like. And from the board's perspective, you're on the user end, the community's perspective, you're on the user end, and what you see on the website and how you navigate eConvene and do a variety of those things. It's not bad. But from a operational standpoint and having to put together these agendas and the lack of efficiency that is involved and the time that is involved to put all of this together is mind-numbing. And I'm grateful for Beth for all that she does, and Gwen as well, and there's a variety of people that use it. But what we're proposing is to use a software company called Board Docs. The notable thing about Board Docs is it is quite a bit more expensive than what we have, but it also comes with some additional bells and whistles and being able to tag things like board priorities to agenda items so that we can track our progress. There, you can put in your strategic plan into it and also incorporate some of those things. You can do a meta search of over 4,000 school districts who use Board Docs. And when they've had policy or discussions, you can actually go back and see what they've said. There's just a lot of things that are good about it. But probably the biggest thing is the back end of it and the users who have to put the information in there. And so we're coming forward with a recommendation to move away from eConvene and move to Board Docs. And I think, it goes without saying, but we're beyond paper and pencil and notebooks of board policies. Everything is electronic and digital in this day and age. It will take some time to transition, so I'm not saying at the next board meeting, if this gets approved, that we would be seeing that. We're going to have to learn how to use the software, and there may be some training involved for trustees in this as well. But end user experience, much better. Front end user, even better.
I'm pretty excited about this program, just the fact that it can track our strategic plans and use Beth and Gwen's time more effectively. So I'm all in favor of this. Any comments, questions, Lance?
Michael, where do you see the 18,000 coming from?
The board's budget.
We don't have that much in our budget, I don't think.
Oh, I don't have that much in my budget.
Yeah, it'll have to be a general fund expenditure going forward. I mean, it's just the reality. And it would be considered a board appropriate board budget.
Thank you.
My question was similar. The Edu portal, is that into that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that must have a cost right now? Is that something we can get rid of to offset the $18,000, or is that used in a lot of places?
Well, we didn't spend the $3,000 on Edu portal this year, so there is a little bit of cost.
So that's $3,000.
Yes.
So it's $15,000 more.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's replacing eConvene and EduPortal?
eConvene is in Edu portal. It is part of that. And
Okay.
so, even like when the question comes up about Washoe County, some of our documents.
Yeah.
So that is Edu portal saying, we don't know how to fix that. So.
And is this an annual contract?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Okay, one last question. Are there, if we have it in the district, can other people, like, is there other places that it could be used as well?
Well, yeah, it can actually be used for any of our committee meetings, you know, anything related to, board operations.
Okay, but just for board things, like, if this isn't a thing that maybe like administrators would then, you know, specifically.
They would actually, so the way that it's set up is, you start with your administrative users, you know, that's your top group, so that's Beth. And then you kind of start parsing out, and you can give different access points to different people and limit access, but also be able to have like, a building principal could go in there and do a building update, or, you know, whatever that may be.
It also has a really robust module for board policy. And it would track your, you know, when policies are expiring and need to be reviewed. And so we'll be converting the current process that we use for board policy, which is mostly PDF, you know, files, into this software as well, so.
It's gonna be much more public friendly as well.
Okay.
We've had issues over the last year with the public not being able to access our policies and our past agendas and things like that because of Eduportal issues.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think that the public is using our website much more frequently, and it's important that it's user-friendly.
Integration into the website is one of the things that we're very excited about.
Will we see past minutes then moved over to this?
Yep.
And they do have 24/7 support.
And one of the things they were excited to show us is that they have board minutes from school districts dating back to 1895. So they've scanned in handwritten documents from 1895. So yes, and this software, just a couple more points that Mike didn't touch on. This software was built specifically for school boards. The other software we were looking at was built specifically for nonprofit organizations, so they had a lot more robust things surrounding fundraising and things like that didn't really support us. Board Docs also has over 4,000 school districts in the nation that use it. Eduportal, not so many, and then Boardable, not so many. So I really think that we've done our due diligence on this. Jason and Rich have really done a lot as well, and we've, you know, had a couple different walkthroughs and trainings with just Jason and I, and then we pulled in the administration as well. So I think you guys are going to be pretty excited if you do approve it and we get to go there.
So I'd like to move to approve software contract and board docs.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion,
Oh, sorry.
motion has been approved unanimously.
And this next item is for the approval of the trustees' financial summaries that you saw earlier, and it actually is a two-motion process, elementary and then district-wide. So it's for the approval of the trustees' financial summary.
I move that we approve the, high school side of that document.
And
Okay.
I move that we approve the elementary.
We have to do them separately.
We have
Oh,
to
we do
second
separate?
it
Oh,
first.
okay.
I'll second the high school.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Will. It's been moved and seconded, that we approve the high school financial summary as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Is there an elementary trustee who would like to make a motion for the elementary?
That would be me. I will go ahead and move the Kalispell Elementary trustee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kim. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Scott. Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? been moved unanimously. Okay, next one. Gwen, still you.
Yep, this is round two of the ESSER two. We actually have submitted this application to the Office of Public Instruction, and it's been accepted, but we've made some, changes to the document, and so we're bringing it before you tonight because, we want you to see the changes, and then also in the process, of approval, we will be able to hire the positions that are contained within this application. So, go up to the actual document. So, you've seen this before. The first piece of this is all about the technology. So, rather than paying for our connectivity and our software items out of the general fund, we will be paying for them out of ESSER. And, the second piece is dedicated learning devices, and you've seen that we have, some funding there for the high school side of the house to purchase some hardware and software, because the elementary side has the technology fund, right? So, but the changes that we made are those highlighted in yellow. So initially in this application, there was a request to hire 2 additional elementary staff, to keep class sizes small, and for, addressing the learning loss, we've increased that to 3, and, mostly in the remote teaching area. There were some new pieces of educational software in the initial proposal, and, the second piece in the yellow highlight there was to hire some after-school tutors at the high school. Glacier High School has a private donor that has given them funding to provide after-school tutors. So we wrote Flathead High School into the ESSER grant, so that both high schools could offer that after-school tutoring option. And, for the high school side of the house, again, we're going to contract for remote instruction opportunities with the Montana Digital Academy. You might remember that in the past, the legislature has funded the Montana Digital Academy, and it has come at no cost to schools. In the last legislative session, their funding was not renewed, and so, school districts will need to pay for those remote, education opportunities. And they have some different models, depending on what the course is and the student who's taking it and that sort of thing. But there will be some cost to that. We want to use them, for remote instruction. And then, also the BYU program, and we have purchased, remote instruction from them in the past, and we intend to continue to do that, through this time of COVID and probably into the future. So those were added in. Actually, and they were in the first one, but we beefed them up a little bit because we're thinking we might have more students in remote than what we initially thought. We also are contracting some additional days for the counselors at the middle school and the counselors at the high school. 1 additional day at the middle school and 2 additional days at the high school. Kind of in anticipation of maybe needing to be able to pivot fairly quickly as COVID, rolls out this fall. We want to be certain that students are supported, and if they need to switch gears from remote to in-person or vice versa, that counselors are there helping them with their schedules and so on. And then finally, this is the SAP program that Matt spoke to earlier, and this is to pay for some of the paid people to attend the training for that program. And so across the bottom, you see that we do have some funds that are not currently accounted for, but some of the items in this proposal may cost more than we think. And we also like to have the flexibility to be able to purchase some things with COVID dollars that we haven't thought of already that might come down the pipe. You can also see kind of where the red letters are there. Those are the deficits on the in the elementary general fund and in the high school general fund. And we will be supplanting, with ESSER dollars sufficiently to cover those deficits and then some. So, this is just some amendments, and as I said, we also, within the motion tonight, like to have approval to hire the staff that are included in this proposal. So questions? You'll be seeing ESSER 3. Actually, ESSER 3 is this times 2, so if you, when you see it, you'll think, oh, I've seen this document before, so.
Sue, I'll move that we approve the revised ESSER 2
We
application.
have a public.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Decker.
Anyway, so, looks like you guys have a little bit of extra of that ESSER money. I was wondering if the school board could consider looking at this product. I just recently learned of it, but I think it's a pretty cool solution, to prevent, close contact cases with COVID. So, I can get my computer to work, I got this thing on here. Anyway, it's called an Air Surface Pro, kind of like an air purifier. But from what I've seen, it's kind of what the space shuttle uses for their astronauts. Or not space shuttle, I should say the International Space Station. And I think, now it's available on the market, it'd be a pretty good solution to this problem we're having. So, what it does, from what I understand, is that it takes in hydrogen and oxygen from the atmosphere, and it expels it, and it creates hydrogen peroxide. It expels it at the molecular level, and it pretty much destroys like 99% of the viruses and bacteria or whatever within a given area. I think it's, let me look here. 500 square feet to 3,000 square feet. And obviously, what a typical classroom is like 1,000 square feet or something like that. So, I think that would be a pretty good solution. The cost of this is $1,500, I see here. So I did a quick math. For the excess we have for the elementary there, so 145,000, you could order 96 units. You need 96? Probably not, but the option is there. For high school, you could buy 63 units. High school, you need 63 units? Probably not. Options there. But I just want to give you guys that information, I encourage you guys to look at it because I'm all for giving solutions to our current problem.
Thank you, Mr. Decker.
And let me give you the website that I found this on. You can all go to it.
Could you also send that to Micah?
Yeah, if I can give you email or anything. Yeah. So, the website here is called activepureairsystem.com. And, they think it's a real good product from what I've been looking at, and, it's advertised for gyms, schools, so it's designed for this kind of atmosphere, So, I want to mention that. And, we can't approve it for this, ESSER. I heard it's an ESSER 3, right? So, yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
That's all I've got, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for putting that motion back up. Any other questions? Anyone willing to make a motion? Will?
I'll make it.
Okay.
Move to approve the revised ESSER 2 application and the posting of position to be hired within the grant.
Thank you, Will. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ursula. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Next up, FCC Emergency COVID Funds. Matt?
And the next two would all encourage Gwen to keep her microphone red to, correct me if I said or not.
I didn't realize it was red, sorry.
Well, I'm supposed to keep it that way.
Oh.
So both these have to do with funds, but they're going the other way, which is nice. They're coming to us. So this first opportunity here is from the federal government. They're putting out a grant opportunity, which Gwen caught floating across some OPI emails and kicked it down to us. And then we roundtabled it a couple times and decided that this was an opportunity we could take advantage of. And so what we're doing here is we're purchasing some Chromebooks with hotspot, and the plan is to get them out to students that are going to be participating remotely or students that need a device for at home, just keeping up with homework. And we have put together a couple different projections and really settled on a number that we think fits in the total dollar amount for Chromebooks, and the hotspots between the elementary and the high school is that $103,000. That's a grant request that we'd be making. And it does go through e-grants, so we've been working with Rich on securing vendors and RFPs and following those steps.
Matt, how is it getting Chromebooks and iPads? I assume everyone's looking for them still.
Yeah, so I think it's easier now than it was several months ago, but we can actually use our current inventory to get them out if we need to get them out next week or the week after, and then we can replace our stock with devices when they come in. What did I miss anything? No. All right.
Any other questions? We did vet this considerably at, Finance Committee, so. Anybody comfortable making a motion?
Sue, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application for FCC COVID funds in the amount of $103,000, $138,000.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Matt, you're still up. Kindergarten approval for 4-year-olds.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this program, just not familiar with how we've done it here. And there has been some legislation that's changed some of the boundaries of this, and so this agenda item has really been cross the T's and dot some I's to ensure that we get the A and B funding for our sub-5-year-old students. What we have here is a list of all of those students, and I guess you only approve it if you want A and B funding for those kids, which I would strongly recommend.
Yeah.
And we currently have 5 classrooms with, 1 at Edgerton, 1 at Russell, 2 at Peterson, 1 at Elrod, and those classrooms are currently full. At least with those kids being registered.
I saw briefly scanning through there, I assume that child that's 3 years and 11 months will be 4 years by the time it's by September.
Was the birthday 8/22 there?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just turned.
Just
I had
turned.
his birthday 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, NMCB.
Okay.
Any other questions? This is an elementary-only motion. Is there an elementary trustee who is comfortable making a motion?
I am, too. I move to approve the attendance of students under the age of 4 in the kindergarten classes, which allows the district to include the students in the A and B counts per the attached list.
Thank you, Kim.
Sorry, are they under the age of 5?
Yes, it'd be sub-5-year-olds.
So that,
Oh, and
because
this
they're
says,
not under 4?
4-year-olds, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, it should say under the age of 5, well, yeah.
So, that's it. I second with that change.
with
Thank you.
that correction.
Mhm.
Okay.
I second
You seconded
With-
that?
with
Okay.
the change.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded with that correction. Elementary trustees, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Consent agenda.
Sue, I move to pass the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Lance. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Diane. Moved and,
Can I bring a point of order?
yes, amend it.
Generally, all fundraising requests go through Finance Committee. This one did not. That was, our error. It was submitted, it just didn't get it into the agenda. But all the T's were crossed and I's are dotted on this one. Everything's signed and accounted for, so just wanted to point that out.
And let it be known that Micah is against the debate team getting to play a game for money. Forevermore.
I just learned what spike ball was, and it was pretty interesting to watch it. Yeah.
So what is it?
Yeah.
It's this game where you have four people and they're standing around this hoop that has a net in the middle, and you have to hit the ball into this net. It bounces up. You have to keep the ball
Oh, yeah.
up in the air.
Alive.
Yeah. And, yeah, I guess it's getting more and more popular. I mean, overseas it is.
It's almost as popular as cornhole.
Yes. It ranks right up there, yes.
Right
I
there
move
behind
we have
darts
a
and
board
curling.
spike ball tournament at the next, just prior to the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that
Admin versus the board.
clarification. Just could be interesting.
I don't think we voted yet.
We did not vote yet, yeah. Okay, so it has been moved and seconded, that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approved unanimously. Facilities update, this is information only. Micah?
I just looked at the agenda and saw that I put that on there, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna talk about facilities update, so I'll make it quick. No more PowerPoints from me tonight. So we continue to work on the, transportation maintenance facility. We are running up against some deadlines, and you're gonna see some things moving pretty quickly coming through the board. And the biggest issue that we're facing is that, from the architect and engineer perspective, we need to get a CMAR, a construction manager at risk. That is the process that you would use to secure a contractor so that they can get a metal building ordered. They're probably 5 to 7 month wait time to actually get it ordered. But once we have that in place, and basically what the process would look like is a smaller committee would interview anybody who's interested in being that general contractor. They would put their proposals together. We can start getting the RFQs out, and then design and all that kind of stuff. You know, they just need to get kind of the general dimensions of it, and so that the contractors can actually start moving forward on that. The reason why the short timeline at this point is, if we're really hoping to break ground and get buildings built and in place for next year, it needs to happen sooner than later. So just know that the facility steering committee is working through this. We have Morrison and Merrily, they've been great. We've worked with them for years in the past as a district, and working with LaRue Page Warner Architect firm. So feel really good about where things are headed. It's just gonna be, there's just kind of a short turnaround. Jack was the only board member present at the last steering committee, but Scott showed up late and then left early. Is that what it was?
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry, I wasn't keeping track here. But just wanted to make the board aware of that. Other things that we're working on, the BOAG land, purchase, it's kind of stalled, and probably more because I've been preoccupied with a lot of other things, related to the district, but we are continuing to move that forward. We do have, some appraisals on the property with different values. If it's appraised as ag land, it would be about, a little over $100,000 for 112 acres, which is phenomenal. In a conversation with one of the county, commissioners, it wasn't the money that they were worried about, it was that it was preserved specifically for ag, purposes. So they don't want us building a bus barn or another elementary school down there. And there's very limited sites to actually build anything, as it stands. So still working that forward. The other thing that we've looked at is, and have made an offer, is on a piece of land south of Legend Stadium and south of our current transportation facility for future ball fields. We have a gentleman's agreement right now for $725,000. Our real estate agent, Dave Gerardo, put it at about $675, and so that's what we offered. It was countered with $725, and we thought that was still within the realm of reason for that property. So we're continuing to work through some of those things. There's some more conversations that probably need to happen with the city around trying to get some land that would make us contiguous to that property, so that we wouldn't have to spend $40,000 going to the voters for an election. So that's the update. Any questions?
Thanks, Micah.
You're welcome.
I think we have lost our public for any comment. So upcoming meetings, before we get to our upcoming meetings, I have the Gyroscope Award to give tonight. Heather presented this to me, and I've been thinking a lot about this. And I know that any picture looks better if you crop the edges. And I am giving this to a person who has helped me, and I think the rest of the board, look at those edges, the things that don't jump out at us, but we still need to consider. And sometimes this person is looking through purple glasses at the picture. But I think Rebecca has really helped me, in particular, look at things differently and at the edges. So, Rebecca, you are the keeper of the gyroscope.
Thank you.
Till the next meeting.
But as somebody who loves this sport, I'll never give it away.
And upcoming meetings, I think everybody can look at those. Sarah's here. We've got a special services committee meeting this week, don't we?
No September meeting.
September, August.
Yeah, but we have an August one.
Oh,
I think it's on the board
I
calendar.
thought, yeah.
There's something about that.
I thought August was over in my heart.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Maybe.
I don't know.
It would have been on your last upcoming.
Okay,
Mm.
that's why.
Which had nice.
Okay, so just make sure that you guys,
And then, Micah, do we have a facility steering on Thursday?
I don't even.
Yes, we have facilities on Thursday.
okay,
And technology.
Yes.
okay. Anything else for the good of the order?
Ooh, I moved that we end the meeting. That's always my favorite motion to make.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Oh.